Welcome to Community Spotlight, where we'll spend a few minutes together learning more about the issues impacting us in the Twin Cities.
Today on our broadcast, I want to talk about concerns over youth depression. We've seen, numbers, statistics suggesting that it has been increasing. Along with that, youth suicide, and there may be some connections to bullying. We want to find out more about these areas today as we talk to Lambers Fisher. Lambers is a licensed marriage and family therapist serving with Christian Heart Counseling. They have 6 Twin Cities metro locations, and you can find out more on their website, christianheartcounseling.com. Lambers, welcome to Community Spotlight. Nice to talk with you.
Nice to speak with you, too. I appreciate it.
So, as we mentioned, youth depression, we're hearing reports that there's an increase number, or at least categorizing, and that youth suicides have gone up as well. And maybe some general thoughts about this growing area of concern.
Well, in general, there is a trend that's being on the rise that's kind of hard to define between whether there's an actual increase or just an actual increase in awareness, because depression in youth as well as in adults, but especially with youth, there's a tendency to keep things inside, not just from family members, which is a growing developmental thing that's always been the case, but a uncertainty about how to share certain things, who you can share things with. You add in peer pressure, you add in social media, and there's this shame inside that says, I shouldn't be feeling these things. Nobody else is feeling these things. Everybody else is fine, which isn't always the case. And then there's this vacuum where we hold more things in, we can't share, or there's not a safe place to share, and not a lot of people doing a lot of listening. And so there's an increase not only in those feelings of depression, those hopelessness, that helplessness feeling, and lack of ideal about what to do, what the future is going to look like, but also a lack of feeling of understanding or empathy from other people. And so between an increase in actual feeling of depression or an increase of awareness of it as people's awareness of mental health struggles as a whole starts to increase, then we realize there's a need there that needs to be addressed.
You know, you said something that just caught my attention. I mean, it seems like we're more connected than ever before with all sorts of social media options, and yet you said people aren't doing a lot of listening. That seems kind of contradictory.
There's a lot of sharing, but listening is not the same. You can share certain aspects, and there's a lot of good things about social media. I don't necessarily knock that, but it brings people close who are really far apart, and so I get the benefits of that. However, the tendency to skew what we share, we only share the good things, we only share the highlights, and so there's this tendency to feel like, oh, well, if I have something bad to share, we don't post that, which means I have to keep that to myself. And thus, we don't get a lot of practice validating, empathizing, say, hey, you're not the only one who felt that way. You're not the only one struggling with that. And so we keep that in, and then we don't get a chance to practice listening to other people and then practice sharing, because we have reason to believe that people will hear and not judge and welcome in the way that we need it.
And I guess the reality is that those things are probably valid concerns, right? Because we can be kind of quick to judge or not be very empathetic.
Exactly. There's too often this tendency to quickly respond and say, oh, that's not that big of a deal. You know what, I've gone through that and I didn't respond that way. Or you're just overreacting. Or even the helpful, all you have to do is this. If you just did what I did, then you'll be fine. Not realizing that the quick answers, even in a positive way, isn't always what's needed. It's sit with my feeling. Help me to feel like my feeling isn't bad. It's not something that should be judged or quickly changed away. And if you help me do that, then I'm more willing to hear your gentle suggestion, because the person who's giving that suggestion is a person who's taken time to truly understand my feeling versus some cookie cutter idea that may seem placating, that may seem patronizing, or just trying to or minimize my feelings altogether.
You know, we mentioned at the outset that there may be some connection with youth depression and even increased amount of youth suicide with bullying. Say a bit more about how bullying has become such a major concern today.
There once was a time, many would think that's not that long ago, when bullying was something very overt. It was somebody who was physically aggressive. You could spot it from across the room. Somebody's physically aggressive or intimidating in some way, which had a precedent to physical aggression, and that was done. You either do it or you don't do it, and you get that bully to stop bullying you in a clear, seen, and overt way, and we're all good. But over time, it's gotten really subtle. I can shame you into feeling like every part of your identity is bad, one piece at a time, one body part, one character trait. I can shame you into feeling like not only is that bad, you're the only one who has that trait. Everybody around you sees it, and you can slowly but surely make somebody shrink, feel bad about themselves, chase other traits and characteristics, not succeed because they're not being true to who they are, and have this slowly pressing down effect where oftentimes it's subtle. It's hard to see, well, so-and-so said this. You're probably just overreacting. You know, they didn't really mean that. And yet it's perpetual, and it can be just as impactful, if not worse. Thus it's easier to become a bully because you don't need to be the biggest kid in the class. You don't need to be the biggest person on the bus or the neighborhood. You don't need to be physically aggressive to have a negative impact on someone. And right alongside that is acknowledgement that the person bullying often is wrestling with something on the inside. There's often this tendency to say, well, in order to feel better about myself, I need to be better than somebody else, which is unhealthy and unfortunate that people conclude that, but it happens all the time. And so there's a lot more opportunities to be bullies. There's a lot more opportunity to be bullied. And similar to what we were talking about before, if there's not a lot of people validating and listening, reaffirming, saying no matter what that person says, you're a good person. You have this positive trait. People like you and have their identity affirmed. Then we're going to see a lot more of that. And so there's a lot more opportunities or not a lot more need to validate and strengthen and empower to combat it.
And I get the impression that these, if we have endured some bullying experiences, that there's some long-lasting consequences with this too. Maybe unlike some other things, that this can stick with us for almost a lifetime.
It definitely can, and that's where the suicide rates increase because we don't often get a chance to get that lifetime for it to last. If we conclude, if that message sinks down hard enough, it can get to that easy place of why even try. This isn't a temporary thing. This isn't a behavior that's being shamed. This is who I am. It's not something I can learn to be different. And if that is true, which it most often is not, if that is true, then why try? I might as well not be here. It'd be better off if I'm not here. And we need to have enough people, family members, friends, counteracting that message, showing the fallacy in that message to say, no matter what somebody else said, you are worth it. There is abilities for you to learn things differently, grow. And even if you never learn a single thing, who you are right now is good enough. Just trying to figure out what the difference is between things you can learn versus things you can accept about who you are, and to say unique is good. Because if you don't, then you'll be trying for the rest of your life to try to overcome that, to try to define who you are by who you are committed to not being, because you don't want to experience that feeling of shame and judgment that you experienced as a kid.
So we've only got just a little over a minute or so left, and you talked about counteracting that message. Is there, when you have an opportunity to speak to parents or, friends that maybe have somebody that's going through some depression, facing bullying, is there maybe one thing that you want to get across? How do we counteract that message?
The best thing we can do is to make sure that we're finding things to affirm in everyone we encounter. It's unreasonable to try to read people's minds and always guess and to say, well, I'll wait till I'll see the need before I do it. The best thing you to do is to affirm and to say, find legitimate things, but to say, hey, you are worth it. I never forget that and would never doubt it. You are worth it over and over again. And if we're all doing that to each other, then we can find strength where we never found it before.
And to be aware, too, that there's a National Suicide Hotline, 800-273-8255, that can help people who are having suicidal thoughts, 800-273-8255. And, of course, we want to encourage people to check out your services there at Christian Heart Counseling, and then go to christianheartcounseling.com. And Lambers, so appreciate this important place that you have in ministry that's making a big difference.
My pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully we're getting a lot more people out there listening and empowering others.
Lambers Fisher is a licensed marriage and family therapist with Christian Heart Counseling, and you can find out more at christianheartcounseling.com.
Thanks for spending a few minutes with us on Community Spotlight. We'll see you again next week.